it's unfortunate that this had to be the first topic of the show.
He ruined what could have been a legendary play, although last night's playback was awesome.
Nikola Jokic versus Joel Embiid. We were hoping that matchup, the second matchup of the season, was going to happen. Embiid dominated Jokic in the first one. We were expecting in the second one, maybe Jokic evens the score, but that wasn't able to happen. Embiid was ruled out, I believe, with a calf injury. And then James Harden also did not play because of a sore right Achilles, I believe. Sore left Achilles, my mistake. I don't know about you guys. Joel Embiid looks awful in this. He hasn't played in Denver since 2019. And I don't know. It feels like a lot of the momentum in Philadelphia gained in March is slowly dwindling down. All that momentum that they had, James Harden got injured.
This is gross.
It's interesting.
James Harden got hurt. They went on a little bit of a skid. I mean, Philly was not too far away from the first seed, if I'm not mistaken.
They were the 2 seed for a couple days, maybe a day.
We know how important home court advantage is in the playoffs, especially in this Eastern Conference, when you ultimately, if you go to Game 7, you have to face Celtics or the Bucks on the road Game 7. So, yeah, these struggles have been a little bit worrisome for me. Joel Embiid has talked about nonstop how the MVP doesn't matter too much, yet when he talks, it feels like it matters to him a lot.
Definitely not a good amount.
He had a chance to solidify his case, lock the MVP award for himself if he played in the game, and he did not do so. What's the most disappointing part about all of this is his interview with Shams before the game that came out right before the game. He talked about analytics and basically said, hey, you know, there are some times where analytics show that guys that aren't good defenders are the best defenders in the league. I mean, who's somebody that fits into that mold? It's Nikola Jokic. He talked about the MVP criteria. What's been a hot topic in terms of Jokic's MVPs? The criteria around it. And then he talked about the pressure to win, which was the one that nauseated me the most. When he said, I'm not a 2-time MVP. Why should there be pressure on me to win a championship? If you're a great player, you want that pressure. If you want to be the best in whatever you're doing, you want to have that pressure on you. You want people to expect greatness out of you. Joel Embiid, and for some reason, it feels this way with a lot of NBA stars today. They just aren't comfortable with that pressure of the expectation of greatness, which is the championship, being on them. I said something similar about Damian Lillard last show. He's somebody else that there has not been an expectation from to win in the longest. Joel Embiid is now another culprit of this where, he sets his own expectations, but when other people set expectations that are probably similar to his, now it's a problem. Joel Embiid is a superstar player. Joel Embiid should expect not only of himself, but for the entire world to expect him to win a championship. Now, it does suck that for the first couple of his seasons, he had to be paired along with Ben Simmons because that definitely, those teams were not going anywhere. But now you have a shot with James Harden. I just don't like these answers that he made. I don't.
Rubs you the wrong way?
It rubs me the wrong way because he says, I've never won anything. So why is there pressure on me to do something when there are guys that have won 2 MVPs? Well, if you feel like you deserve those MVPs, then you should put that pressure on yourself. If he doesn't win MVP, I don't really care. Because he had a chance to solidify his case and he failed to do so.
Let me go next because I'm 100% in agreement with you. Word for word. Last night could have been Embiid's exclamation point as to why he is the true MVP. No questions. No thinking that Kendrick Perkins completely swayed everyone's perspective of who should be the real MVP. No, he would have went toe-to-toe with Jokic for the second time this season. And where, in my opinion, you definitely outperformed Jokic the first time around, you could have done that the second time around, and now Jokic is home, and really stamped it that you are the undisputed most valuable player. Not playing, and then on top of it, the quotes of you trash-talking Jokic subliminally without really calling him out. Same thing with Giannis. and then you not play against him, and then your team, where it ended up becoming a close game. The team definitely fought back. They ended up losing by, I believe, 5 points. They brought it down to 3 points at one point, but they were losing by 20. So credit to Philadelphia, especially now that they're on a 3-game skid. Was a 2-game skid before last night. It was nice to see them put some life into the team. But Embiid just comes across cringy to me. Embiid was and has been phenomenal all season long. He is definitely deserving to be in the conversation for most valuable player. My personal MVP is Giannis Antetokounmpo, but it seems as if it's a 2-man race between Embiid and Jokic. And Jokic has been phenomenal, but regardless of that fact, the fact that you ducked, not really ducked, but the fact you didn't play. I say ducked because as fans, what were we looking forward to most? We scheduled an entire event, our playback, to watch Jokic versus Embiid. Not the Sixers versus the Nuggets. We wanted to watch Jokic versus Embiid. And when we found out that Embiid was ruled out, it was a huge sting because a lot of people love narratives. What better narrative than Embiid goes into Denver and hands Jokic the second L of the season to solidify his claim as the MVP? Instead, it seems, hey, Embiid didn't want it. Embiid didn't want to play against Jokic to potentially ruin his chance at being the MVP because he was the odds favorite. The ties had changed. Embiid was the strong favorite to win MVP. And for this to happen at the same time where he is subliminally talking trash on Jokic is cringy to me. It really is nothing but cringy.
There's a couple of different ways you can look at this. Joel Embiid's talked ad nauseam about how he doesn't care about the MVP race, and that's because he wants to win in the playoffs. Would you rather a Finals MVP or regular season MVP? And I think for any great, you would take the latter. You'd rather have the Finals MVP. And so for him, I'm sure that his injury, whether it was Achilles, so on and so forth, I'm sure it was a real thing. But the issue here is the fact that the 2 leading players are MVP, not the players themselves, not about Jokic, not about Embiid. The top 2 candidates for MVP, the 2 best centers in basketball. That's a matchup that we had marked in our calendars for a month. And the fact that Embiid, the day of, gets ruled out and we have to see Dwayne Dedmon getting cooked by Jokic, that's a problem for the NBA. As a fan, that is a real issue when the 76ers have lost 3 of their last 4 games. There's no other way of really putting it. For Embiid, that would have won him the MVP if he won the game. As simple as that, because we look at head-to-head matchups heavily. Last year, it's what gave Jokic the edge. So much so, he won the award by a landslide, 65-26 first-place votes. So I look at Joel here, and I understand where he's coming from because he had plantar fasciitis earlier in the season, and he's focused on staying healthy in the playoffs. But if there's any game you're going to sit out, that was the last one.
And I believe in that same interview, Joel Embiid was talking about one of these next games, I'm going to need a day off. I don't think it's a coincidence that he kind of planted that quote in there and then took it off, almost saying in a sense like, I told you guys I needed a day off, I needed rest. But then you look at the rest of their schedule. I mean, the Nuggets are going to be one of the hardest teams, obviously the best team in the West. They had the Mavs tonight, right? The day after, back-to-back, I get it. But, they played yesterday, so the day off. But then you have the Raptors after that. Then you have a couple tough games against the Bucks, Sixers, and you finish the season out with the Heat. But
Celtics.
if you want to
They play the Celtics.
Yeah, if you want to
They go
finish
Bucks,
off
Celtics. You said Sixers accidentally.
My bad. Celtics. But if you want to sit and beat out, wouldn't it be against the Sixers? Or, excuse me, doing it again. Against the Mavericks, where you have a Mavericks team who is sliding, just lost 2 games to the Hornets. We're going to talk about them more in a little bit. But now we've been talking about not only if we had this on our calendar, but that this is going to decide who wins MVP. Yep. Because it's been this close of a race the entire season, and Embiid taking more of, the catching up later on in the season. But it's been so close that this one single game where, in the NBA, you don't really talk about one single regular season game having really any importance outside of maybe the play-in now. Yep. But in terms of an MVP having this importance, and Embiid sits out. From the Sixers' point of view, they do have 2 games up on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yep. So I could understand why, or 3 games at the time, actually, in the loss column. So I can understand from a management coaching perspective, Embiid says he needs a day off. He's our superstar. We're going to give him a day off. Plus, you have Harden out already, so maybe you feel that you're at a disadvantage with Harden out against a great team on the road in Denver. So let's sit Embiid out because hopefully they could both be back against Dallas in this last stretch. But it's a tough look when you're going out there and putting all of those negative comments out there about someone you're going to compete with that day, and you don't even go out there and lace them up and prove yourself, right? So Embiid, his overall goal should be winning a championship, but his comments saying, why is there pressure on me? There's pressure on everybody. you're an NBA player. That's on him. It's on Tatum. It's on Hart. Like, there is pressure on everyone to go out there and win. It's a shame he didn't play.
I'm glad that you mentioned that last part, especially Tatum, because Tatum doesn't have an MVP.
Yeah.
But there is pressure on Jason Tatum because he went to the finals, and he was not the Jason Tatum that we know. Here's the good thing about Jason Tatum. He's made it to the finals. He's made it to the ECF. Joel Embiid can't say that.
You know what's funny is that in the article, Joel Embiid, in response to one of the questions, said that he was talking to Jason Tatum earlier this year when he was on a great stretch and said, don't worry about MVP, just worry about winning. And I found that very ironic given that Embiid hasn't won and he was trying to give Tatum advice on how to win. I was like, who does this guy think he is? When I summarized the article, the Shams interview with Joel Embiid, it's three things. Embiid on why he should have won MVP and the goalpost shouldn't have been moved. Number 2 is Embiid trashing Jokic's defense. And number 3, why people shouldn't put pressure on him to win a championship. I think that he totally victimized himself in this entire interview. And it's interesting because he talks about goalposts moving when it comes to the MVP award. Joel Embiid has missed 14 games this season. If he wins MVP, he'd be the first MVP since Bill Walton in 1977-78 season to win the award. So basically, if Embiid wins it this year, the goalpost is moving. But I don't know why that's such a bad thing. A goalpost should be moved on a year-to-year, year-in-year-out basis. Every single year in the NBA is a different year.
Absolutely.
That's a strong statement in my opinion. I feel like, me personally, the most valuable player should go to the best player that season. Now, Jokic, Embiid have been 2 of the best players in the NBA. Embiid has missed however X amount of games, but that shouldn't take away from how great he's been. But availability, consistency matters to me a lot. Jokic has been one of the most available, one of the most consistent players that we've seen. And listen, Jokic would be more than deserving to be a 3-time back-to-back-to-back MVP, no doubt about it. But I say that they shouldn't be because I'm still upset that, of course, every time we have MVP conversation, you know I'm going to bring LeBron James into it. I'm still upset that LeBron James was not back-to-back-to-back MVPs.
In 2011?
Correct.
He would have won 5 straight, technically.
Correct. But it was understood why he did not win. He made a power move to go to Miami. It would have been a bad look on the league to make him the MVP.
Derrick Rose also had a great case.
Derrick Rose had a great year, but he was not better than LeBron James in my opinion.
He was not the MVP.
Derrick Rose is not better than LeBron James, but Derrick Rose led a team to 60 wins, the first seed in Eastern Conference, with key players injured the entire season.
They won more games than the Heat, but the Bulls that year did not have a top 10 offense. The same way the 76ers with Allen Iverson did not have a top 10 offense when he won MVP in 2001. The same way Russell Westbrook did not make a top 10 offense in Oklahoma City. All of those teams were built off a thicker defensive foundation that was top 5. And I feel like in Derrick Rose's case, while all those players were deserving, it was the narrative. It was the storyline that got them MVP, and not because
it would have been 5 times actually that LeBron won MVP.
I think Russell Westbrook, it was definitely not because of the storyline. Russell Westbrook deserved it in 2017.
You could have went many different ways.
You could have went many different ways.
It wasn't until he had the 42nd triple-double and the game winner versus the Nuggets that people said, okay, it's not Harden's award, because Harden that year led a top 3 offense with a similar support.
Well, no doubt. I think Harden,
Kawhi Leonard,
2017, I think James Harden definitely deserved MVP consideration. If I was voting, I would have definitely voted James Harden. Am I biased in that? 100%. Was Harden deserving that? 100%. But
over Russ, you're saying?
Yeah, but we cannot leave out the fact that a top 2 player in the world left Russell Westbrook, and he still led a team to the playoffs and averaged a triple-double for the first time in 50 years.
Yeah, that's a storyline, too.
Exactly.
That's a storyline, but that's also his PER. He has one of the historically his PER that season was historically great. It's not just the triple-doubles.
They were the 16th ranked offense in the NBA.
Their winning percentage when he had triple-doubles was phenomenal.
John,
so
let me also give you something that's similar to that, right? In baseball, we haven't seen a Triple Crown winner in years, but Miguel Cabrera did it. The first time that we've seen it, I couldn't tell you the name off the top of my head, but it'd been like 40, 50 years. If you want to look it up, I appreciate that. But this entire time while Miguel Cabrera is putting up the Triple Crown season that he had, right there is Mike Trout with an amazing season of his own. So good that we're even having the conversation of, hey, is he going to beat out Miguel Cabrera for the MVP? But because he did something that we haven't seen in God knows how long, he was the obvious choice to an MVP in this situation.
History matters.
History matters.
Yeah.
History matters. Where Russell Westbrook did something that no one thought would ever be done again.
John, why was Steph Curry the unanimous MVP in 2016?
2016? His team won 73 games.
Historical. That's
and
it.
He was
and
also-
his shooting was unbelievable.
Yes.
the best player on the best offense, and he was the engine of that
The
offense.
best team. That's usually
And I
how it
think,
goes.
No doubt.
let me just clear this up right here. Russ deserved to be in the MVP consideration, same way Allen Iverson and D Rose did. All I'm saying is that they were not the most valuable player. Well, they had a case because those teams were built off a deeper defense opposed to a top 10 offense. Like, they weren't leading top 5, top 10 offenses. And if that's your side of the ball, if that's where you're going to drive performance, you've got to be at the elite level status.
You also have to have the players around you to do things like that.
But Jokic last year, top 10 offense with his second best player being Will Barton or Aaron Gordon. That, to me, that level of driving performance, that is a lot more impactful than the 16th ranked offense in
there's
Oklahoma,
still
Oklahoma City's case.
I agree with that statement, which is why in 2018, look, we're just going through MVP years. I think LeBron James was the most valuable player. Look at who his second best player was.
Yeah, you
right?
got a case.
James Harden was phenomenal. That Houston team was phenomenal. Without LeBron James, this is the #1 overall pick in contention to be.
But let's just be straight. Let's just be honest here. You're talking about Russell Westbrook leading the top 10 offense. The starting lineup
was not good.
Russ, Oladipo, Andre Roberson. Does he have an offensive skill that you can?
Did
you
Victor
can
Oladipo
recall?
win most
Corner
improved
three.
next season, averaging 23 points per game?
Okay, isn't Jalen
Oladipo was
Brunson
a solid player, but we can continue.
Isn't Jalen Brunson doing something similar when he plays without Luka?
we can
I mean,
continue.
come on, play styles clash. We know that.
It's true.
Taj Gibson was the starting power forward. I mean,
And then Steven
we
Adams.
serious?
And
And
then
Steven
Steven
Adams.
Adams.
Yeah.
like, come on, bro.
It was a one-man
made
show.
for
Those
defense,
are
I get it.
three.
It was a one-man show.
Those are 3 inept offensive players, and
Yeah.
Oladipo is like an offensive player and a half.
And he
like,
still averaged over 10 assists. Like what he did was absolutely unbelievable.
But it's more so the storyline than anything. If he had 9.2 assists, he's not getting MVP.
No, he needed to
He
average
needed
a
to, he needed to have
No
10.
doubt.
Exactly.
he needed
so-
to do something historical.
Yeah.
And that's why Jokic averaging a
And
triple
he
double
also
right
had
now
the most
is
triple
not
doubles
really
in a
viewed
season.
as
That's right. That was
he's
insane.
by
Well,
far
Jokic
and away
would
the
be getting it
MVP.
because, like Drew said, he's consistent and available, and they've been the #1 in the West for the entire season. No one's even really been that close to them.
But you know what I can appreciate about James Harden is James Harden every single year in Houston. There would always an interview would always come out with Malika Andrews or something like that. I think it was his last season,
It's always
2019.
Malika.
James Harden always in his interview said, "It's about winning the championship. We're gonna win the championship. We're gonna win it." He put that pressure on himself to say, "We're gonna win a championship this year. This is the year we're gonna win." I would have liked that sense of urgency from Joel Embiid. I feel like Joel Embiid sounded a lot like internally he wants to win a championship and he's putting that pressure on himself to win a championship internally. But Dehls, if you tell me I have to win, no. Why are you telling me I have to win? I'm not an MVP, but internally I feel that way. It just doesn't make sense.
It
Doesn't make
It's,
sense.
And for one of the best players in the NBA who had a legit case to do it, like, I just don't understand what you would gain from those comments. And it's not like Embiid's going out there looking for an interview, trying to, up his reputation. It's not like he needs any of that. But as someone who wants to be respected with those guys, obviously you would assume Embiid wants to be one of the best players in the NBA. I feel like all of those guys have very similar mentalities. Like, even if they're not as vocal, like Tatum isn't a vocal guy, but you saw in the interview after the season ended, I think it was with Malika or Taylor Brooks maybe, but he said like that hurt. Like, I was not sleeping, like it kept him up at night. And the fact that you could just hear that from your superstar, especially coming from a Celtic fan, I can only imagine what that thinks for Philly fans, how that resonates with them, because they've been itching for just the Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Now you have one of your best players in franchise history saying like, it doesn't really matter to me. Whatever happens in a sense.
Yeah, basically,
Upsetting.
I don't want you guys to have that expectation of me.
Yeah.
So if I come
It's a
up
loser
short,
mentality.
if I come up short, I don't want you guys to criticize me for coming up short.
Don't you think part of that's also Embiid just being tired of the BS? From Ben Simmons to James Harden last year being a no-show, not even getting the ball in the second half, to Doc Rivers always crumbling in big-time moments, just throwing stuff, whatever's throwing it off the kitchen sink. That
He could be tired,
he's
but
had a lot.
there's a
of
better
different
way to
issues.
go
I
at
understand,
it.
but
you could say like, I'm just focused on the playoffs, or like, I just want to win a
I
championship.
think
But
he
John,
just
do you-
learned
do-
though
are you
there's a
not-
lot of uncontrollables and a lot of
course.
things that need to go
But you
right.
just say it, just
But John,
for
let's
look of it.
also be fair when it comes to Joel Embiid. We look at the Jimmy Butler team, 18-19 season. Who's the one that played poorly against Marc Gasol?
Joel Embiid.
Look at the
Pretty
next year in the second round versus the Hawks. Who's the one that in over 3/4 of those fourth quarters was not good?
He was playing through a knee injury though.
No, he
he's been
was,
banged
and I
up
give him.
multiple-
That's why
multiple
I
playoff
understand
runs,
he was
though.
playing through an injury, but he also did not raise his game either in those moments.
He wasn't being elevated or supported. I mean,
He
his point
wasn't.
guard.
He
is-
wasn't.
That's granted.
He wasn't.
Power forward masquerade as a point guard.
Listen,
that
he
can't
wasn't.
look at
I
the rim
understand.
like
All
foul
these
shot.
excuses you're giving him, I understand, and I'll
But
take
that's
them
the
into
type
context.
of BS that not many other players have to deal with, but Embiid has perennially. And so while he hasn't went to the conference finals, there are few players that have had to deal with as much nonsense as Joel over the last 4 or 5 years.
I don't know about that. I mean, Kevin Durant has 2 championships, and people are still questioning his legacy, me included. You understand what I'm
Because
saying?
the
Like
way
you
he
can
won the
prove your
chips.
you can prove your greatness, and it still not be enough for people.